So our first panel is the view from Wall Street. The moderator is Rob McDowell, former FCC commissioner. You will find there's also another theme here, also proud Duke alum. You can see it in his tie and his cufflinks. Our other moderator, Dean Brenner, also a Duke alum. You're seeing a slight pattern here, I will note.
No booze or anything.
So Rob will be running this panel, and without any further ado, let me turn it over to Rob.
Well, thank you, Professor. It's great to be here on many levels. I'm here to moderate. Nothing I say today will be the opinion of anybody, including myself or any of the clients of Wiley Rein or Wiley Rein. And we could actually go on and on and take up the next hour with disclaimers like that, but I won't. Now, Stuart, you gave me some of these cards regarding timing. I think this one was meant for me at all times. Now, is Marci?
Oh, I'm sorry.
You got to.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we're going to redo.
No. And Marci.
Panel introduction, take 2. Go. Okay.
Sorry. Marci Ryvicker's flight has not taken off yet because one member of the crew overslept. So tragically, this is a true story. I'm not making this up. She had a 5:50 a.m. flight, and the flight has not taken off yet. So Marci is teleconferencing in. Jason is here. Marci is on the phone and watching the webcast, but Marci will be here only as a virtual presence. Sorry, I apologize. Now, without further ado.
I hope the pilot's sober. If that's the case, then no oversleeping. So Marci, glad you're not flying. Now Jason's going to go first?
Yes.
Okay, and Marci, magically her voice will come?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. This is amazing. The voice of God. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. And can you see the screen at least?
I can see you. You cannot see me.
Do you work at NSA? This is a little creepy.
Yeah.
Okay. So well, this is good because this is video, right? So you're watching us via video, and that's what this whole conference is about.
Yeah.
So Jason, now that I've consumed all of your time with the introductions, you're going to go first. We're going to skip over the introduction because everyone knows who he is and who he works for because it's up on the screen. And you'll launch into it, and Marci is then going to talk as well. Stuart, is this how this is working? Okay, we're improvising here. And then we'll have some Q&A, perhaps, and then Q&A from the audience. And this is a fascinating topic, which, of course, I worked on for many years at the FCC. So without further ado, Jason, take it away.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I have an 8 and 10-year-old, 2 kids, 8 and 10. And they sometimes ask me, what does an equity analyst do on Wall Street? And what I tell them is, my job is to predict the future, right? Which at some level is true. It's a little more complicated than that because you can't predict the future if the market already expects that outcome. So you have to predict the future, and it has to be a variant view, right? If I said the sun is going to rise tomorrow, and there's a stock out there that measured how many lumens are going to hit the Earth, if the sun rose tomorrow, the stock wouldn't go up or down, right? If I said the sun's not going to rise tomorrow, then the stock's going to fall, right? So it has to be, you have to predict the future and be variant. So how do we do that? Let me see if I can get this clicker. What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through some historical slides that I would argue sort of encompass the consensus thinking about what's going on. Then we're going to pivot into the soft underbelly of the economics of the video business and then talk about a little bit of game theory in terms of why there might be a variant outcome. What this slide shows is what everyone would know, which is, SVOD subscriptions are growing both in the United States and globally. It's a little over 40 million subs in the US today. Everyone knows that. This is what's going on in terms of video consumption in the United States. The blue line is traditional linear viewing. The green line is the one that the Wall Street is very focused on, which is the amount of viewing that goes on through SVOD platforms. It's probably about 5 or 6% of the total. So SVOD is taking a bite out of ratings. These 2 slides show you what's going on with pay TV subscriptions. You can even ignore the one on the left because it gets sort of complicated. I like the one on the right. It just shows pay TV penetration rates in the United States, which peaked in 2010 at about 84%, and it's been drifting lower. So what do we know? We know SVOD, people are buying it, they're changing their viewing habits, and a small fraction of all the people that have SVOD are actually cutting the cord. So now, as an equity analyst, what do? You could pretend the trends stop. That would probably be a variant view. You could just extrapolate it. That would sort of be the consensus. Or you can begin to think a little bit differently about what might go on. And that's what I'm going to try and explain here. So if you think about Hollywood, they use, I would argue, 3 microeconomic tools to maximize profits. The one on the left, windowing, right? A movie comes out in a movie theater, you pay more than if you get it on VOD or if you wait for it to be on a free-to-air channel. Bundling, where a bunch of cable networks are clubbed together and you have to buy a big, fat group of them together. That's a way to increase profits because you flatten the demand curve and shrink consumer surplus. And then segmenting. You go out and you buy a pay TV package, and if you're affluent or have extra money, you can buy HBO on top of that. The one I really want to focus on is number 2, bundling, because this is what I call the soft underbelly of the whole pay TV ecosystem. What we did is essentially go out and ask a simple question, which is, if a piece of linear content was put on the web, how much would you get for that? How much would a rational business manager charge for it? And to do that, you have to build demand curves. So I won't go through the details, but you can do this just based off of Nielsen data, looking at things like CUME scores, which is how many people tune into a channel, the ratings, how popular is the channel, what people pay for their pay TV bill. And you can go through a 4-step process and create a demand curve for every cable channel. I'll give you an example. This is Comcast. And so on the x-axis, there's their share of households, and the y-axis is how much we think each household, how much utility they would ascribe to the channel. And you can see here, NBC, the broadcast network, is Comcast most popular, followed by USA, and then they've got some niche channels. CNBC, we watch that on Wall Street. Most people wouldn't really care about that. And then you say, well, what is the profit maximizing price? And normally you'd say that the area that the spot on the demand curve that maximizes the area under the demand curve, P1, Q1. Our argument is that the media companies would have an incentive to drop the price a bit because they want to get more audience, because we have to incorporate the advertising facet of this as well. So if you go through all of that math, for every media company, how much would they get if they put their content online? You add up the profit maximizing price and you compare it to the prices that they're getting today, you get this very interesting chart. And to me, this is like the chart that matters. And this shows what would happen to each company's equity value if they took their cable channels and just put them online to compete directly with Netflix. What I care about most on this slide is the high variance in the payoff diagrams, because what this points to is essentially incentives for some of the media companies to break ranks. Like right now, everyone holds hands and sings Kumbaya and says, let's sell our stuff in bundles, right? And what this sort of points to is, as the cord cutting accelerates, you might see one media company break ranks. The odds of you breaking from your brethren are higher if you're on the left, and they're worse than if you're on the right. The interesting thing here is if someone does break ranks with their brethren, that's going to, of course, cause more cord cutting. And that's going to cause someone else to break ranks, which is going to cause more cord cutting. And so you can very quickly see the whole ecosystem just goes sort of right down the drain, and the company that's all the way on the right is going to be like a deer in headlights because they're not going to know what to do. So what's our view of the future of video? The answer is SVOD is real, over the top is real. It's probably going to play out, extrapolate the past trends, but sort of be braced for exogenous shocks where the industry could get far more interesting. And I guess those are my comments. I'll turn it over to Marci.
Fascinating graph, and I have a lot of questions on this later. So Marci, did you get all that?
I got it all. I like that last slide. I agree with a lot of it, disagree with the part about Disney being up, but we can get into that a little bit later. So we started talking, or Jason started talking about the premise for us being here is really to give predictions as to what might happen to the TV ecosystem, which is kind of ironic given what we do, because Wall Street analysts, myself included, sometimes can barely predict the next quarter. So predicting 3 to 5 years out from here can often be sometimes difficult, if not impossible. So while it's tough to talk about the future, we at least have to recognize what is going on in the TV ecosystem today. So I just want to address a couple of facts. Fact one, there are still just under 100 million pay TV households today. Fact two, cable still has the largest share of these pay TV households at 53 million, so that's just over 50%. Fact 3 is that Netflix had 42.5 million subs as of the end of the second quarter. Fact 4, cable bills have been rising faster than inflation and GDP growth for the past 5 years, if not longer. Fact 5, viewership levels on both broadcast and cable have been in double-digit declines for 2 years in a row. Fact 6, Comcast was supposedly not allowed to buy Time Warner Cable for fear that this combination would threaten the Netflixes and the Cogents of the world, despite the fact that there was very little evidence, if at all, of this intention. I guess that's a little bit of opinion thrown into that fact. Fact 7 is the current administration has not been considered a friend to any industry within the TV ecosystem, whether that be cable, wireless, or broadcast. Fact 8 is children watch fewer hours of live TV each year. Fact 9, Disney's premium franchise, ESPN, is losing subs. We aren't sure if it's 1.5 million or 4 million, but we know subscriber counts have come down over the past several years. And fact 10, Apple TV has been delayed again, and maybe this time indefinitely. So if you take all of these facts into account, you ask, all right, what does this all mean? On the one hand, to me, it definitely means that consumers are changing the way that they engage with content. But on the other hand, I don't think that change is happening overnight. So we go back to the initial premise for us being here, and again, I laugh at my own complete inability to predict the future. But I can say this, I am a strong believer in the bundle. To me, this is a much better option for consumers and programmers and pay TV providers than a la carte ever could be. And while I do think there will continue to be cord cutters, cord shavers, and cord nevers, I see these segments of our society as the exception, not the rule. I think the ecosystem in general is stronger than investors give it credit for, but I also think that the fate of this industry lies with the decisions that are made by the content providers. And it feels like some of these decisions might have felt like good ones at the time, but those decisions now seem to be what's hurting these companies and the stocks. And as I've said countless times in my research over the past few months, we choose distribution over content. Because it doesn't matter whether I have a skinny bundle, a fat bundle, or an over-the-top bundle. No matter what content I choose to consume, I need that broadband pipe into my home to be able to consume it. So I'm not going to give you my predictions for the future, but I'm going to give you my hopes for what the future brings. So I hope that content companies actually shut down those little networks no one watches and focuses on investing in their franchise brands. I hope that the FCC doesn't try to regulate high-speed data rates. Of course, that's based on my hope that the cable and telco companies remain rational in terms of pricing. I hope content providers protect their content and their eventual talks with Apple TV or any other new entrant. I hope Hulu takes over Netflix as the dominant SVOD provider. I hope advertisers start making better and more creative commercials so that my kids don't act as if they're being murdered when a commercial interrupts whatever sporting event they're watching. And I hope that the industry really focuses on TV everywhere and stacking rights, because I think this combination can end up being the perfect solution, where consumers can get what they want while both programmers and pay TV distributors get paid. And with that, I guess I turn it back over to you, Robert, for questions.
Wow, that was very efficient. Thank you. And a lot of substance there. We could talk all day, but we don't have that kind of time. Jason, she said a lot, and would you like to react to some of the things she said? Agree, disagree, analyze? I have a number of questions based on what she said.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think a lot of what Marci said actually makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I would ask her to amplify or clarify is when she says she's a strong believer in the bundle. Is that coming from the perspective of a shareholder? You like the bundle because it helps shareholders, or you like the bundle because it helps consumers?
I think it helps consumers.
Okay.
I mean, we did a survey a while ago on asking 1,000 people to choose the 10 networks or channels that they would put if in a perfect scenario, and it was the 4 broadcast networks: ESPN, Showtime, HBO, AMC, CNBC, and the Food Network. And if you actually priced that out separately, and you added in standalone high-speed data, you get a monthly price of about $160 with 7 different providers. Versus if you price the same thing out with a Time Warner Cable double play in New York City, it's $160, and you get more for that. So to me, the bundle is better for the consumer.
Okay, then that would be our only point of disagreement.
You want to elaborate? Why do you disagree?
Well, I mean, it's widely recognized in economic circles. I mean, Janet Yellen actually wrote one of the papers before she was the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Bundling information goods flattens demand curves. Flattening demand curves shrinks consumer surplus. That's good for media companies. It raises the video ARPU. It is the soft underbelly. I would say this, you can look to sort of put a finer point on it. When Sony View came out and wanted to buy content, what did the media companies say? They said, sure, we'll sell you our content, but you got to buy all of our stuff in a bundle. And it's predicated on you getting a similar agreement from every other media company out there. Right? They didn't want Sony View to go out and just get 2 companies' content in a bundle. It had to be all of the big ones. Why? Because it flattens the demand curve. They didn't want to unwind the bundle. And then the other reason are these demand curves, which I'm happy to send anyone that wants them. It shows unequivocally that consumer bills goes down by half.
Excellent. So part of what I do these days, I try to translate between Washington and Wall Street. So I'm just sort of like a Google Translate, but for those 2 communities. So Marci, if you could back up, because you said a lot in a short period of time, and I want to, I'm just trying to interpret some of what you said. So are you saying essentially that over-the-top is bad for linear cable channels that are already trying to offer over-the-top?
I think over-the-top can work. It can't replace. It's more of a complement. In one of the slides that I give to investors, we have a chart that shows the cost of every network owned by these companies. And if you look at what Disney offers, right, the premium channel is ESPN. So that's $6.61 that Disney gets for every pay TV household. And so if Disney were to go over the top with that $6.61 to break even just on ESPN, let's say there are 20 million unique viewers, which is something that's been in the trades but never confirmed, then those 20 million people would need to spend $30 a month on ESPN for Disney's break even. But Disney has all these other little tiny networks, and so those add up to $11.31 that Disney gets from the pay TV distributors. So my view is Disney won't go and ask those 20 million viewers for $30 to break even on ESPN. They'll ask those 20 million viewers to pay $60 to break even on the entire affiliate fee revenue. So I think it comes down to, I don't disagree with Jason that, being forced sort of to watch stuff that you don't want to, that is not necessarily good for the consumer. So, one of the first things that I said is that I would hope that some of these media companies would actually shut down those networks we don't want to watch and invest more in the content of, more in their franchise brands.
Jason, do you want to react? Agree, disagree?
No, the only thing I would say, I mean, the number, I mean, I don't want to get too much in the minutia. I'll just give you sort of client feedback. When we did these demand curves for ESPN, it said 25 million households will pay $20 for ESPN. The CUME number, which is all the people that tune into Disney each week, is 35 million. Just to frame it, it's a known number. What's interesting is when we published this research that showed Disney would be slightly better off, and we sent it to all of our clients. Right now a lot of hedge funds are selling Disney because they're afraid of cord cutting in these long-term fixed-price sports contracts. What's interesting is a lot of, you can imagine, money managers do work other than read sell-side research. They did their own market research, and they said, we totally agree with you. Our work says 25 million households will pay $20 for ESPN. They said, where we disagree with you is you have this other channel out here called ESPN2, and your math says 16 million households are going to pay $11 for ESPN2. I said, why do you say that? That's wrong. Where's that come from? I said, it's just the ESPN2 demand curve. I don't know what to tell you. And so the question is, if it really goes back to, for these hedge funds that did market research, if when they said, how much would you pay for ESPN? The hedge funds might be right if the market research that came back, reflected the consumer thinking of ESPN as the full panoply of all of the ESPN channels, right? That would be true. My argument would be maybe Disney comes out with a two-tiered ESPN platform. Do you want ESPN Gold or ESPN Platinum, right? And so, these are really important questions. I think the good thing and the most important thing for you all is Wall Street is focused on terminal year questions, right? We're asking, I mean, that is the key question. What is going to happen to these big media companies? Are they going to put their content online? That is the question.
So are you all looking at the consumer behavior of millennials? Are you looking at Gen X and older for that? Because, you know, my focus group is my 3 kids, so 16-year-old, 14-year-old, my daughter's birthday is today, by the way, and my 8-year-old son. And they are watching everything on a mobile platform.
Right.
Very, very rarely on anything bolted into the wall, right? So live sports is different sometimes, but there are technologies and services out there that enable that as well. So what does this do to the greater economic ecosphere for quality programming in general, whether it's scripted or live sports or whatever? What's going to happen for them?
Okay, so there's no doubt that if you look at the Nielsen data, the rate of change is happening most acutely for the younger demos. You look at the data, older people that are like 55 and older have just discovered that there's a DVR, right? So you see DVR use go up for the older demos, but the younger people are watching SVOD. What I would say is that the industry with Sling has begun to respond to millennials that are younger, because here's another Achilles heel. I'll just explain it on affiliate fees. Affiliate fees are charged on a per household basis. You pay whatever, $6 per sub per month, but that's for the whole home. So what did Charlie Ergen do at Dish, right? What he said is, look, these millennials, they live alone. And so let's go out and offer Sling with one stream. And therefore, we can lower the price of the pay TV package to appeal to these millennials to make it more affordable. But they only get one stream. So that's a recognition that their young people are changing. They're price sensitive. The cable bill is too high for the whole household. And so they're responding to it. It's where the boundary layer of change is going to occur, but it will ripple through the whole ecosystem. It reminds me exactly of what happened to telephone in the 90s, right? People said, oh, it's just the young kids. They'll terminate their landline, but once they get married and have kids, they'll reattach the landline. It never happened. And the same thing is going to happen here.
Marci, you want to react to that, and then we're going to open.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I don't agree, because if you ask Disney, right? I think actually Disney has the biggest risk going over the top. And going direct to consumer. Right now, they have a beautiful model. They're paid $11 and whatever cents by 98 million households. You go straight to the viewer, and you have such big sports costs, $5 billion a year. You're dependent on the consumer to basically pay for that, and the advertiser, right? And so as a consumer, I can churn on and off. If I don't like the season, I'm not going to pay. If I do like the season, I'm going to go back on. That is not a steady revenue stream for Disney. Disney, I do not think they're the least ones likely to go over the top. Now, when you ask Disney, why did you sign with Charlie Ergen, right? You have the premium content provider signing with Dish, which is the low-end pay TV distributor. Why would you do that? Their response was, we are trying to introduce millennials to paying for content so that as they grow older and go through different stages, they're used to it, they like it, and they come into the ecosystem in a different way. It may work, it may not work. We just don't have enough data. But you know, at the end of the day, I go back to it's the content providers that are making these decisions. They're the ones that want to make money. We want them to make money to be able to invest in content that we like, and therefore they have to figure out how to put their content behind a paywall. I don't think OTT helps them. I think it hurts them. There's a better way to do it. They can do it through TV Everywhere and stacking and keep it in the ecosystem.
You're furrowing your brow, and I know we want to. Stuart's dying to ask.
Well, no, I don't.
Go ahead.
Marci, there seems to be an inherent contradiction. You said that it was good for consumers to bundle, and now you're saying that if they go over the top, it doesn't work for the media companies. Well, the corollary is it's good for consumers. So,
it's not. It's not good for consumers because you get so much more in the bundle. You will always get more in the bundle.
Okay, then okay, all right.
Stuart. Professor Benjamin.
Yeah, I was asked the first question. Also, I'm going to say we have 2 mics, so you can raise your hand. We can bring them around, and please identify yourself when you ask a question. I hope
it is streaming.
It is streaming, so we have. I could bring a mic around, but
it's
I will
the
actually
exact opposite of Chatham House rules, too, by the way.
Yeah,
so
but I will ask the first question because we are in D.C. and there's a whole panoply of regulations that apply to MVPDs. So we've got horizontal concentration, struck down, there's supposed to be horizontal concentration limits, vertical integration limits. We've got retrans consent, must carry on and on and on, all this whole special regime for MVPDs. And I'm wondering, from your standpoint, advising people on Wall Street, which if any of the regulations that apply in the video world do you care about, do you think move the needle, that actually really matter to you?
Talking to Jason first.
Jason and Marci. I'm looking at Jason because I can't see Marci, but for both Jason and Marci.
We'll start with Jason, and then Marci will tee you up.
I would say the only two things Wall Street cares about from a regulatory standpoint have to center around retrans and broadband pricing. All the other stuff around OVDs becoming MVPDs or vice versa doesn't matter to Wall Street at all.
Marci?
I agree with that. I mean, we both do the same thing, and I think our conversations are consumed with Title II and what could happen with retrans. The fear in both cases being that the government will regulate rate.
Okay, we have some questions to your left right here.
Yeah, I was going to ask how you see or could speculate about how the multi-channel operators will get involved in online content distribution in the future. Marci, you mentioned TV everywhere. I mean, do you see it as potentially that these will be unbundled and from the pay TV subscriptions, and that this will be the way that pay TV operators get involved in online content distribution themselves?
And for those who don't know you, you are?
Oh, David Waterman from the Federal Communications Commission.
I think TV everywhere is more of a partnership. We're getting into earnings season, and I'm sure Jason's doing the same thing I am, which is talking to all of the big cap companies. And what we have noticed in our conversations on Wall Street is that investors are starting to look at the media stocks again now that some of the conversations from the big cap companies are saying we're moving a little bit away from Netflix and we're selling more to Hulu. It's in the ecosystem. And investors like that. So you take it a step further, and when I was in my conversations with these media companies, I asked, so, how do you strike a balance between what you sell to Netflix and what you keep in the ecosystem, and what do you see as the perfect solution? And the media companies, I think all of them have agreed, at least in my conversations, that if we could get TV everywhere to actually work, and we provide stacking rights to the pay TV distributors, they can replicate a Netflix-like experience. Keep people paying, because behind TV everywhere is a paywall. You keep people paying for video, and you keep people paying for high-speed data. It allows for that steady affiliate fee revenue, which allows the content companies to continue to invest with visibility. And so that is sort of the conversation that is starting to evolve. I don't know why TV everywhere has taken so long. Some media companies have said it's an issue with ad insertion and its technology. But that's sort of where I'm hoping that we go, because I think it's best for everybody.
Are you saying TV everywhere has gone nowhere? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, TV everywhere has gone nowhere.
In terms of traditional media companies putting content over the top, I think of it in three chapters, three segments. There was the early experimentation sell to Netflix, which was viewed as free money. Now that, as Marci said, there's an awareness, I think, among these media companies that they may have hurt themselves. We're in the middle of chapter 2, which is what are the no-regret moves? What content can we put online and not hurt ourselves? And so CBS All Access is an example of that. At $6, that is not a profit-maximizing price. That price is designed to protect CBS from hurting themselves if someone does cut the cord on the heels of that, right? And the retrans goes away and the high CPM television advertising dollars go away. CBS is agnostic at $6. Our demand curves say the profit-maximizing price for CBS is like $2.70, just to give you a frame of reference. And then HBO and Showtime are no-regret moves too, right? Time Warner moves as to a retail ARPU from a wholesale ARPU. They pick up another $7. But if the consumer cuts the cord, they're going to lose $6 on Turner ads and affiliates. So those are the no-regret moves. And the existential question is what happens in Chapter 3. And one way this goes is the rate of change is slow with cord cutting and nothing really happens. And the other way is the consumer begins to cut the cord more aggressively. And then I would argue the slide behind me becomes more germane.
Oh, so I'm Joel Waldfogel. I'm an economist at the University of Minnesota. I'm so delighted to hear the word microeconomics mentioned here. But I wanted actually to ask a question about that. One thing we know clearly about bundling is that bundling raises revenue and profit. Its effects on consumers are ambiguous. Now, the idea of jumping off the cable bundle, is it really about jumping out of the bundle or about jumping out of the cable bundle, given that there's a decline in demand for cable? And I guess the follow-up question on that is there any obstacle to bundling over the top? Because again, bundling in principle should be great for revenue and profit. So jumping out of a bundle is a symptom of something else going on, I think.
Right, so I agree with you. Bundling is good for revenue and profit. So the question becomes, why would you jump out of the bundle? That's why I come back and say it depends what the pace of the cord cutting is. Right? If we live in a world, hypothetically, where only half the people have pay television, I would argue there's less downside to jumping out of the bundle and potentially more upside, right? If Marci's right and we stay with 82% pay TV penetration, no one's going to move. Because the one thing that I didn't show you on this slide, look, these numbers show it that you can, in our view, for some companies get close to replicating the income statement. But Marci's right. There would be churn. You'd have channel conflicts. And you wouldn't be able to replicate the growth rate. Embedded in all, Marci's model, my model is 8% affiliate fee growth per sub per year. Once you pivot to a retail model, you're going to raise 2 or 3%, right? And so the growth rate is going to change, and that would hurt multiples. So there's a lot of risks in doing this. So no one's going to proactively do this. I'm just arguing that the incentives are not uniform. That's the most important thing for all of the media companies. Do not look at them monolithically.
Marci, you want to react to that?
There are some aggregators out there, like Roku is one of them. So, you know, and there are some websites you can go to where if you put in what you want to watch in terms of networks, they can tell you exactly where to get it and they can try to aggregate it for you. So that is something that is out there today. If it gets bigger, who knows? But I still think it goes down to the price for the consumer. And if you live in a household with a family, you're probably watching a bunch of different types of programming. Now, when a long time ago, I think in 2010, there was another analyst, Spencer Wong, who came out and said, you know, all these content companies selling content to Netflix is the death of media. And in a way, like looking back, it feels today like he's probably right. But in going back to that time frame, and we talked to the media companies, you know, what's your reaction? They said, look, you know, if we do break the bundle, you know, we may not be sold by Comcast, but as Time Warner, you're going to have to buy the Turner bundle. So if you want to see TNT and TBS and watch those basketball games, you have to buy everything in Turner. And Disney would do the Disney bundle. And, you know, so it really is the decisions from the programmers. And you know, I've been asked in some of my meetings, could the regulators ever come in and debundle on the wholesale side? And so far, the answer I've gotten is no, that is a market decision. And I don't know ultimately if that would happen.
Should it happen, Marci?
If I go back to I don't think it will. Whether it should or shouldn't, I don't think it will. I think Disney has too much cost. They can't rely on the consumer or viewers for revenue.
Other questions from the audience over there? Oh, I'm sorry, you teed up time. Okay, sorry.
This is Jake Freeman from the FCC. One way that you kind of an approach that splits the baby is authentication, where a cable company that's negotiating with a content provider that has a bundle may not take all of it and put it on the cable package, but will provide an authentication mechanism by which people who want to watch the content they don't want to carry can go online and watch it if they've subscribed to the provider. Do you think that's a practice that's going to increase, decrease? Who would win? Who would lose?
Well, when you say authenticate and you can watch it online, are you talking about like a library content? Or are you talking about channels that you don't want to pay for? What?
I think both. I mean, for example, one that I'm familiar with is I'm a Verizon subscriber, and they've made a deal with NBC Sports to carry their main feed, but they don't carry sort of some alternative feeds that have different games on them. But if you're a subscriber to Verizon, you get a code and you can get that. But that can also happen for, you know, as Marci was talking about, content companies that have, you know, great flagship brands. Then they have these networks that nobody watches or very few people watches, and that could split the baby. Do you think that's a practice that would work? over long haul?
I guess it would. I mean, I sort of broadly think about why someone would do that, and it would be scarcity of distribution. And to me, we've sort of gone through the difficult part of the cable plant being sort of starved for capacity as they were navigating analog, digital, and HD, where we sort of made it through that once the plant goes all digital. So I guess so, but I'm not sure there's a scarcity of distribution even on the legacy coaxial plant. But I haven't really thought about that question.
Next question.
Paul Brigner from the Internet Society. I don't think I heard a lot about the adoption of video over wireless and 5G coming soon. How does that factor into your analysis?
You mean as a substitute for broadband? Is that what you mean, or just?
Well, yes, and just as a distribution platform.
And video consumption over mobile broadband, yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, video consumption over mobile is going to certainly grow. It's interesting, if Mike Rollins is my counterpart that does the wireless stocks, what he's lamenting is that he's not seeing any top-line growth. So I run down to our internet analyst, and he's talking about his Google and Facebook growth rates are huge, and everything is mobile and social. And then I go to my telco counterpart, and he says, yeah, I'm not getting any top-line growth. And when you sort of unpack that, what's happening is the consumer is willing to use mobile up to their limit of how many gigabytes they can consume, and then they turn it off. And so, the telcos don't see any top line growth, even though the internet guy's getting tons of growth. I mean, that's like the starkest dichotomy. So the corollary is I'm not sure, yeah, it'll continue to grow, but people don't like consumption-based pricing in the marketplace, and therefore it's going to sort of limit the magnitude of demand.
I'd also go back and take a look at some of the streaming products out there. Now, granted, we're not at 5G yet, so maybe that does change, but the streaming products haven't always worked. Go to the NFL Sunday Ticket. DirecTV had, on multiple occasions, issues where games were not streamed. I think 3 out of the last 8 games were not streamed last year. You have Sling TV. When the NCAA championship games were on, it went dark. I think with Aereo, when it was alive, they couldn't do the Grammys and the Super Bowl. So, I don't know that wireless will be able, in some events, be able to allow consumers to watch the same type of content and the same experiences they're used to watching with broadband in the home, or even over your TV.
I've got one other sort of broad thing about wireless, at least it's one of I didn't bring it with me, but it's one of my favorite slides. I'll try and explain it. If you plot on an x-axis how many wireless customers each of the mobile carriers serves per cell site, it varies from about 800 at the low end to about 2,300 on the high end. On the y-axis, if you plot what their EBITDA margins are, it's 99% correlated, meaning running a mobile network is a fixed cost business, and you just have to get more customers under each cell site to actually generate profits and cash flow. The break-even number of how many customers you have to serve per cell site is about 1,000. Okay, so if you're serving less than 1,000 customers per cell site, you're going to burn cash. More than that, you're going to make cash. That is the linchpin of the underlying dynamics, because as a mobile carrier, if I was only serving one customer under a cell site, yeah, I could deliver them Google Fiber type speeds, but you're not going to generate any cash flow, so Wall Street won't tolerate it. And that's the real conundrum, is that you can, as a wireless operator, you can either mint cash flow and give people a crappy service, or you can burn cash flow and give them an awesome service. And that break-even dynamic is where, when you run through the math, it's not clear that mobile is a viable substitute for broadband under the FCC's 25 megabit definition. It actually comes out to about 12. So mobile, we don't really view it as a rival.
Let me just interject a little bit. So are you saying under that 25 meg analysis, but consumers are only using 12? So should consumers be defining what broadband is, therefore? It's 12.
That's
I
fair.
think is what you just said.
That's fair.
Right.
No, you're right. I mean, and so then the question, let's say that the FCC is wrong and 25 doesn't matter and 12 is really all you really need, then it becomes sort of interesting. And then the question is, does the whole expectation that the consumer has sort of shift over time as we move into 4K or virtual reality or whatever, right?
Marci, any reaction?
No.
Okay. Stuart, any questions? Look, okay, we have one over here on the left. So.
Hi, Gordon Schaff from Capital Forum. There's been a fascinating discussion so far about the economic models of delivering these products to market, but I was curious, it seems like with Comcast, Time Warner, there's companies that are both acting as distributors and providers. And I was curious about the panelists' thoughts about concentration in that market and how it could be positive or negative to consumer prices. I know over the phone we heard about concerns about Title II, so just some comments about concentration in the market.
When you say concentration, are you talking about, you're narrowing it to vertical integration and concentration between content and distribution, or?
So both. So we've talked sort of about two separate things, the providers of content and the distributors, and if there's mergers between those two, or if there's just greater ownership of, for example, there's more concentration in the allocations of spectrum, and how that could affect consumers at the end of the day and the pricing of the products.
Marci, do you want to take a crack?
I mean, Comcast and Time Warner Cable didn't work, so clearly there's a level of concentration that is not going to be accepted here by multiple parties. I do not believe that distributors are going to try to get into content. I think Comcast bought NBC Universal because they wanted to test video, they wanted to watch what consumers were doing in order to make the pipe into the home stronger. I think what they found is the jewels of NBC Universal were the studio and were the parks more so than the cable networks and the broadcast networks. And so Comcast is the one probably who's innovating more. They have more stacking rights. They're doing more binge viewing. They're testing more. So I don't think we're moving into a situation where you have more vertical integration. As a consumer, I would love to have more choice. This is speaking not as an analyst. I only have Comcast. I have no other choice unless I want to do DirecTV on my house, but then I still have to pay Comcast for internet, and it's a higher cost to me. We like the service. We hate the customer service. And I think that's where the reputation of these companies come into play. And what is encouraging is the fact that Comcast is now out there spending money and hiring 5,000 people to at least fix the interaction with the consumer, which, you know, because we do like the service, at least helps the reputation. I like the innovation that a larger company has. And with scale, you can afford to invest a little bit more and take more risk than without scale. But I don't know that I'm educated enough to say what's too big.
I'll give you my sort of context for the consolidation that's happened and what it means for what might happen. What I think motivated Comcast in the past is as they got larger and larger in the distribution side of the business, they were never able to bend the programming cost curve. Their affiliate fees were still going up 8% a year, even if they got bigger and bigger. And I think they said, look, if we can't beat them with scale, we'll join them, right? Now, ironically, they did that in 2009, right before the ecosystem began to change. So Marci's right. I think the reason they bought the asset ended up not being the reason they like the asset now. The question is, you know, the Wall Street consensus is, well, now that we have some pay TV consolidation with AT&T and DirecTV, will the media companies consolidate to restore the balance of power, right? Do they? And the answer, I think, is an unequivocal no, because no one has demonstrated that they can get enough scale to bend the cost curve and extract leverage over the content providers. No one's done that, right? At 22, 25, however many million subs. So the question, if you're a media company, is why do we need to consolidate? Even if the distributors get bigger, we still have the power. If our content disappears, they're going to lose. And then you think about it from, you know, at the board level or the CEO level, and you say, well, wait a minute. If I go buy one of these companies to get some scale on the content side that may not benefit me in any way, what risk am I going to incur? How do I know that I'm not over-earning? And I think where Marci and I differ is these media companies are over-earning because of the bundle, and that's why Netflix is able to come at them, you know, at now $10 a month. And so there's a real risk, right, that you're overpaying for the asset even though the stocks have come down. Because if the whole bundle unravels, you're going to look like a dummy for paying for cash flows that were generated off of the fat bundle, right? So this is why M&A hasn't happened, in my view, on the content side.
Stuart, we have time for maybe one more question from the audience.
One short question.
And I have if no one else does, a really quick question for Marci based on something you said in your constructive discussion, and we really only have like 2 minutes or less. So you said Hulu may take over Netflix. Programmers are starting to sell more to Hulu right now, a little bit more than to Netflix. Do you want to explain to folks exactly what's going on and why in 2 minutes or less?
Hulu is owned by the programmers. And so Hulu is considered in the ecosystem, right? Fox, NBC Universal, and Disney. And so what we've heard is a little bit of a change in tone that the content providers understand that by selling content to Netflix and completely outside the ecosystem, the SVOD revenue is no longer 100% incremental, right? It's now offsetting declines in syndication. It's offsetting declines in advertising. And so to get us comfort and to get themselves comfort, they're striking more deals with Hulu than with Netflix. And for some reason, that is creating some level of comfort in the marketplace.
Okay, excellent. Well, first of all, let's give especially Marci a big round of applause and the technicians that made her presence here possible. So thank you, Marci. And Jason, thank you as well. And he offered his slides to people, and I want a copy. So here's my email address. So please give him your card if you're interested. Thank you so much, and thank you, Stuart. Great job with the center. You're doing a wonderful job. So thank you.
All right. So we